The Bill Belichick era in New England is no more. The New England Patriots have decided to part ways with their longtime GM and head coach, one of the greatest coaches of all time. And I think it presents an interesting scenario for the coaching vacancies in the NFL. And let's talk about that. So Bill Belichick, from a Jets fan, he always pissed me off, right? Number one rival. I grew up on the days of Rex Ryan versus Bill Belichick and the coaching and the playoffs and all that. Um, Bill Belichick's success, his cockiness, his attitude, his smugness. Uh, what else? His irritating leaving of the Jets when he was the head coach for like a couple days and then decided he didn't want the job anymore. There's many layers to why I could rant and rave about how I don't like Bill Belichick, but I'm not gonna. I shouldn't say I'm not going to. I'm gonna try not to do that today. At the end of the day, he's one of the most winningest coaches of all time. He had 24 seasons with the New England Patriots as head coach and GM. His record was 265 and 120, not including the playoffs. Obviously, he has six Super Bowl wins as head coach. 301 career wins as head coach, which is third most in NFL history. He's, I believe, only like within a couple seasons away from getting that number from Don Shula. And I think he's going for that 100%. He's a three-time Associated Press NFL Coach of the Year. 19 straight seasons with winning record as a head coach, which is the second longest streak in NFL history. He had 31 playoff wins, 44 playoff games, and 9 Super Bowl appearances, all most by the head coach in NFL history. Listen, I think if you're building a Mount Rushmore of NFL head coaches, if Bill Belichick's not on it, you either don't know football, you're biased, or you're just doing it incorrectly. And you could argue about whether he's the greatest coach of all time, right? You could argue about whether he's the greatest coach in the NFL right now, but to say that he's not one of the best coaches of all time would be blasphemous. The amount of success he's had, um, both with Tom Brady, um, I shouldn't say how should I phrase this? Both because of Tom Brady and with Tom Brady. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of the comparison is Brady versus Belichick. Which one was most responsible for the championships? At the end of the day, there's a balance. There's a balance with every quarterback and head coach, but I think this was one that was unique in that if Belichick didn't take a chance on Brady at the beginning, Brady would have never turned into what he was. And some of those Super Bowls were really Brady taking over and winning them. Some of them were Bill Belichick absolutely out coaching the other team. And so you have to give credit where credit's due. I know Bill Belichick doesn't have a stunning record outside of when Brady was in New England, post Brady, if you will. But at the end of the day, his success, Brady's success, is not in spite of Belichick whatsoever. It's largely because of Belichick and the chance that he took on him and the quarterback he developed him into being the greatest player of all time. And so that has to have some merit to it. But it was time. It was time Bill Belichick moved on. And part of me thought that he was going to stay. Part of me thought that he was going to stay and not be the GM, just be the head coach. But him and Robert Kraft met. They decided it was time. And I think it really makes an interesting landscape for the NFL head coaching search. I was doing some research before doing this YouTube video, and I pulled up an article from NBC Los Angeles ranking the available NFL head coaching openings in 2024. Now, this was written January 10th, so yesterday, after Pete Carroll, it was revealed that Pete Carroll, I shouldn't say retired, but he's moving into a front office role and no longer coaching. But before Bill Belichick was announced as leaving New England. And so they have 7 vacancies. They rank Carolina as 7th, which is easy. Tennessee as 6th. The Vegas Raiders at 5. The Chargers at 4. I'd rate them higher, I think, given that they have the answer at quarterback, and most of these teams don't. Atlanta Falcons at 3. Seattle Seahawks at 2. And Washington Commanders at 1. And that surprised me a little bit. And not to dive too deep into this article. This article is written by, I should give him credit, Sanjesh Singh. But what he basically says to the Commanders is that defense has been stripped. Sam Howell doesn't appear to be a fit, but they have, some good offensive talents in Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Brian Robinson Jr. Need to improve the offensive line, but they have a lot of cap space, 86 million, most in the NFL. And then they also have 3 picks in the top 40, including the number 2 overall pick. They brought in Bob Myers, and Myers knows how to rebuild a team. Sure. Bob Myers, of course, the former GM of the Warriors that built the dynasty that was Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant and Draymond Green and such. And while I understand that cap space is great, I can also look at the fact that cap space means nothing. Cap space is air, as the great Michael Kay likes to say. Yankees announcer and New York radio host. Cap space only matters if you spend it well. I remember the Jets went into an offseason several years ago. I don't remember what year it was. I want to say it was like 2019, 2020. They went in with the most cap space in the NFL. They signed CJ Mosley. It was 2019, I believe, who I thought was a great signing. Looks to be a great signing in retrospect, but really didn't fit with the defense they had with Greg Williams. He was a little too big, ended up losing weight and fit well into Robert Saleh's system after he lost all that weight. Not to say he was fat or anything, but I mean that he was just more of a physical, muscle bound presence, and both for Greg Williams' scheme in when Adam Gase was the head coach, and for Jeff Ulbricht's scheme with Robert Saleh as the head coach, they needed more of a slimmer linebacker. So that money was okay. Le'Veon Bell was the next big contract. His money was completely wasted. He spent a year off football and looked absolutely awful with the Jets. They also spent big on Kelechi Osemele, the big tackle, 7-0. I believe he played for the Raiders before that. He ended up being a very poor signing. They signed Jamison Crowder, whose contract didn't end up being anything good. The most cap space in the NFL turned out to be not that great. They also drafted Sam Darnold either that year or one of those years around there, who ended up being a flop of a pick. So they were in a very similar situation. Most cap space in the NFL, number 3rd overall pick, and they flopped them both. Sure, I think the Washington Commanders job is intriguing, but if we're calling it number 1 based on those requirements, I think we really need to know who's the GM of the team first, because those decisions are what makes this head coaching vacancy something valuable. And now we relate it back to the Patriots, who are the subject of this video. I feel like the Patriots having $70 million and the number 3 overall pick, and much more talent than the Commanders, in my opinion. Much more talent than the Commanders. Just a lot of injuries this year that kind of led them to that point. I think they were a better team than they showed. Given that situation, I think the Patriots would be number 1 if we're using this logic. Now, I don't agree. I don't agree that the Commanders are number 1. I think the Seahawks are probably number 1. The GM has shown to be able to get talent at any point in the draft. I could argue that the Chargers are 2, considering they have the answer at quarterback and a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. It seems like coaching was the only thing that was going wrong. Well, there was that the wide receiver pick last year, but we're not going to talk about that. Listen, at the end of the day, I think New England's an interesting conversation because Bill Belichick was both the head coach and the GM. I don't know where they're going with this. I don't know if Robert Kraft's interested in making a big splash. I don't know if the big, quote unquote, big splashes, aka Jim Harbaugh, would be willing to go and succeed Bill Belichick as head coach of the New England Patriots. I think it's all very intriguing. And when you have a team who's spent so long doing so well with one guy, and before that was in complete football anonymity, right? If we look back at the Patriots pre-1995, they were the 3rd, maybe the 4th team in Boston. Right? It was the Red Sox number 1, the Celtics number 2, and then maybe the Bruins number 3. You could argue the Patriots, whatever. They were one of the teams, if you're a kid listing all 32 teams, you might forget about New England, or 30 teams whenever you were listing this, or however many teams there were in the NFL at the time. You might forget New England. And Bill Belichick, with the help of some good drafting, took what was one of the most notoriously poor performing franchises in the NFL and took them to greatness. So where does this team go from here? And I don't know where they go. I don't know if the sexy name is one that they should be interested in. And it seems like, the Patriot way is going to rely on a guy to come in that's had some experience, that knows the ownership. A lot of people think that's Jerod Mayo, who's already got a clause in his contract to where he could succeed Bill Belichick. I, for one, think it could be Mike Vrabel. I think the Patriots thought Jerod Mayo would make sense because they didn't think Mike Vrabel would ever leave Tennessee in the next few years. Now that Mike Vrabel is leaving Tennessee, has left Tennessee, has been fired from Tennessee ridiculously, has plenty of ties to New England, Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft. I could easily see him there. And if I'm picking a guy today, if I'm predicting a guy today to be the next head coach of the New England Patriots, I think it's obviously going to be him. But I wouldn't be shocked about Jerod Mayo either. So I guess the big names are not really something that I expect them to be in on. But at the end of the day, the choice is going to be an intriguing one, both for the fact that the dynamic I talked about where the Patriots go from here, but also for the fact that just from a football perspective, they have the number 3 overall pick. And if the first 2 picks are quarterbacks, Most likely they'd be Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC, and Drake May, quarterback out of UNC. The Patriots could go a lot of different ways. They could go quarterback and take a guy like Jaden Daniels from LSU. They could go offensive tackle and take a guy like Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. They could go wide receiver and take a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., who might be the best player in this draft, wide receiver from Ohio State. What's intriguing about all of that is that they need an answer at the quarterback position, whether it's in the draft or not. One name that was floated out in my comments recently, and if you're watching this video, shout out to you. I don't remember who left the comment. I apologize. But they believe that Kirk Cousins was the answer at quarterback for the Patriots. Now, they also believe they should draft a quarterback. And I don't think that's realistic for them to devote that much money to the quarterback position because they're already paying Mac Jones plenty on his rookie guaranteed salary from when he was drafted top 15 overall a couple years ago. Bailey Zappe's, I mean, he could be gone or he could come back. It doesn't really matter. But if you're drafting another guy, especially at third overall, you're going to have to pay him a pretty penny. You're also going to have to pay Kirk Cousins a pretty penny to get him out of Minnesota because Minnesota's certainly going to want to keep him, I believe. Now, so I don't think that's possible. But I do think Kirk Cousins is an intriguing choice. And if the Patriots are committed to going to an offensive lineman because they don't love any quarterback outside of the top two, or maybe they're committed to getting the best player in the draft, which could be Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know. I can't count the scenario out. I think the Patriots need to address the quarterback position, but I don't think it needs to be done with a number 3 overall pick. And so that next coach will have a lot of say, I think. And they're going to be very involved in who it is. And if it's Mike Vrabel, well-deserved. Nothing against Jerod Mayo. I just don't know a lot about his coaching history. I can confirm, in my opinion, Mike Vrabel is a very, very good head coach in the NFL. And until I'm proven wrong, I'm going to have that opinion solidly. And so if he's involved in decision-making, good for New England. I think that's the best path forward for them. And on the other side of this whole divorce, Bill Belichick. It's not clear whether he's going to be a free agent. I assume he's going to be a free agent based on their terms, parting of ways, mutual parting of ways. So I'm assuming they're releasing him and not trading him. At the end of the day, either way, there's going to be teams that are interested in him, obviously. Tennessee's rumored not to be interested in him, which is hilarious. I guess they just don't want to pay him. But assuming Harbaugh doesn't go to these teams, I could see teams like the Chargers and the Bears, who actually don't have a vacancy yet, or the Atlanta Falcons, or even the Washington Commanders. I know they said they're not interested. I could have seen them being interested before they released that they weren't. If the Raiders somehow don't keep Antonio Pierce, which I think is very doubtful, and don't get Jim Harbaugh rather, I can see them trying to make a play for Bill Belichick. What a move! It would be a very Mark Davis move to swing for Bill Belichick and give him GM duties after they fired Mike Mayock, was it their last GM? I don't know. I don't know where Bill Belichick ends up. I put out a video, and it's the last video on this channel, that the Falcons' dream offseason might be Bill Belichick and Justin Fields. I could see that, certainly. I don't think that's the likeliest of scenarios for Bill Belichick. If I had to put down a prediction today, I'd say the Las Vegas Raiders. While I think that they keep Antonio Pierce, I think their second best odds would be to get Bill Belichick. I don't think that's an outlandish take necessarily, given Mark Davis's flair for the bold, right? Remember when he pulled John Gruden back out of the booth just a few years ago and gave him $100 million and really started the sharp increase for contracts for head coaches in the NFL? This would be a Mark Davis splash move. Go get Bill Belichick and give him GM duties for the Raiders. Now, where they go at quarterback would be an interesting conversation, but I wouldn't hate it. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Where do you think Bill Belichick's going? Do you think he's going to coach this year? Where do you think the Patriots go from here? Do you think Jerod Mayo's their next head coach? Do you think Mike Vrabel's their next head coach? Do you think it could be some other candidate I'm not talking about? Maybe Ben Johnson? Lions offensive coordinator? I doubt it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate you taking the time out to watch this quick thought video. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.